Righto, beautiful afternoon on a Sunday. Been out in the shed cleaning bikes and just mucking around and getting to the point where I'm pretty happy with the 480 now. So I was thinking to myself, I might just take it for a run and do a bit of a walk around. A bit of a review, short practical review as I say, on SPR. Yeah, just have a bit of a chat about why I bought a 480 and what I've done to it since to make it into a lightweight adventure bike. I'm really determined not to end up with a, you know, like a 1190 or a BMW 1200. I really want to stick to the lighter weight bikes and be able to basically go anywhere a four-wheel drive can go. Don't want to be sort of too limited, and I want a bike that's versatile. So we'll talk all about that, and as I said, the mods we've done and what I think is important when setting up a bike. And it's only my opinion, but anyway, stick around, we'll have a chat. Righto, as I said, we'll just give the bike a bit of a run on a Sunday afternoon. Just come out and do a bit of a review and a bit of a discussion, or a short practical review as I like to say in SPR, on the 480. Okay, so just a little bit of history. Have ridden dirt bikes for a long time. Bought a 10RA when I was about 23, took a year off work and just travelled up the east coast of Australia. Come back and just rode it on the odd occasion and eventually sold it, but haven't owned a bike since then till I was about 49. My son wanted to get into dirt bikes, so we went and bought a 230 and a 150 Honda and went out and started playing around on motorbikes. That was 6 years ago. I'm 55 now. And yeah, we've ridden most of the brands now and just sort of experimented and researched and worked out what we do and don't like. We've ended up on, he's ended up on a Sherco 300 and I'm on an X-Trainer 300, just because of my body's starting to give up on me, so the X-Trainer's a little bit kinder to me. But yeah, just in the last year I've just started thinking about doing a bit of A.D.V riding again. Pretty determined not to end up with a big 1200 or a big bike. The 10RA I had back in '88 was quite tall, 23 litres of juice, up really high. It was just no good in the bush at all. So what you ended up doing is just riding on the gravel and riding on the tar, and that's what I really was against. I didn't want to get a bike that was that big and that tall and that heavy and limited, I guess, limited on what you could do when it came to riding in the bush. So my first port of call was just to get a 450 or a 500 or something along those lines, a dirt bike, and turn it into an A.D.V bike. That's where I'm coming from. So yeah, that's where I came to. Wanted a nice light bike. That's my first and most important thing. It had to be light. I certainly didn't want to be riding around on a 190 kilo BMW or 1190R or something along those lines. I wanted something that I could take out into the bush. Right over there is some great fire trails and some really good single trails. I've had this bike in the single trail. It goes all right. It's an older style bike. They're a little bit heavy. It's 112 kilos dry. So, you know, they've still got a lot of inertia, these older style bikes, but still a quite versatile bike, and that was my second thing. A light bike, and it had to be versatile. And these certainly are. I've still got the original tank. I can put an 8.5 litre, 9 litre tank back on that. I've got the original seat for it, and so it's very versatile. I can take it back to a full-on race bike if I like. I then take off those big the lights and the bash guards and all that sort of stuff, the bark busters, and the rack on the rear, and it turns back into a full-on race bike again. And certainly without that 15 litres between your knees, it certainly becomes a lot more agile. Why the beater? Well, basically I just set out to buy myself a 450 500 bike. The third thing I didn't want to do was spend a lot of money. It's not that I can't afford it, I just thought, you know what, it's a bit of an experiment. I'm not sure if I'm going to like it. Let's not just go waste a whole heap of money, buy a new bike and find that I'm not really enjoying it and have to sell the bike and lose five or six or seven grand in the process. So I just wanted to buy a good second-hand bike and just, I guess, do a social experiment and see how I go. So yeah, I went out looking for, I guess, the WR 450 or a, Honda 450X, KTM, Husqvarna 500s or 450s, anything like that. So I wasn't particularly fussed. And certainly probably my first choice was probably a WR 450, pretty legendary, good Japanese bikes and that sort of stuff. So I just kept my eye on the market for over a month or two, and this popped up. And so I did my research on this, and certainly they've got a very good reputation. This is a 15 model Beta 480. It's got the carby still, so I sort of like that idea. You can sort of pull a carby down on the side of the road, whereas if a fuel pump goes or a fuel injector goes, you're knackered. You have to carry, if you're going to sort of do a bit of remote stuff, I reckon you want to be carrying spare fuel pumps and spare fuel injectors. I know certainly with the KTMs they're quite renowned for doing both of those, probably not so much the XCs, but the 690Rs and that sort of stuff are renowned for doing the fuel pumps on them. So this one popped up, $3,200 with a bit of gear and that sort of stuff, and I thought, that's interesting, 3,500 Ks, and I thought that's worth having a look at. So I went and had a look, and I just bought it straight away. It was a great buy. The guy was not riding it anymore, splitting up with his partner, and so yeah, it was a really good buy, $3,200. Come with the seat concept seats as well too, which was quite handy. Unregistered, so I put it on the road, put some dot tyres on it, got it roadworthy, put it on the road for about $4,000, a little bit over $4,000. So it was still a cheap bike at that with 12 months rego. From there, then we decided that I'd take it for a ride. So I did some Dargo rides on it, and it was all bloody awesome. And I loved the bike. On fire trails, it's just an absolute weapon. It's so easy to ride. There's so much power, and they are really good fun. I've been riding two-strokes mostly for the last couple of years, and getting back on a big bore four-stroke is a lot of fun. So on the fire trails, they're awesome. But certainly you get to these older style bikes, the inertia is not managed that well. In single trail, they are a bit of a handful. They take a fair bit to pull up and lean into corners and pull up out of corners and that sort of stuff. And you really notice they do tend to wear you out in fire trail. So it's not a bike that I would spend a lot of time in fire trail, especially with that 15-litre tank. You can do it, of course, but you wouldn't spend a lot of time. And obviously compared to an X-Trainer, which is 99 kilos, and so much lighter and so much fun, it's like a mountain bike with an engine in it. So one of the reasons I bought the 480 was basically because they had such a good strong history as well. When I did my research, making sure that I could get the tank for it and I could get a rack for it and that sort of stuff, they really did review quite well. There wasn't any real issues with them at all that I could find. Very strong top end. The followers, the way the double overhead cam is set up, really rarely ever go out of adjustment. Blokes are getting 200, 300, 400 hours out of them without touching them. They're not prone to wearing the final drive like some of the KTMs and that are if you don't put a push drive on it. So yeah, I thought, well, that all sounds good, and certainly there was lots of people who were actually riding them as A.D.V bikes. One of the big things with any of these bikes when using them as an A.D.V is that they're a fairly short stroking motor. The WR 450, the XC 450, the Honda 450 CRF-L or 450L, whatever they're called, the Husqvarnas, they're all 60mm stroke on them, so they're a fairly short stroking engine. The exclusive one that's not is the KTM 500, or it's actually a 510. They're 72mm, so they're a bit more of a long stroking engine. So yeah, they're probably a little bit different. Obviously they're a larger capacity, but all the other 450s and the 480s are all around the 60mm. So there are a short stroking engine, and that's their limitation. They like to be revved, and they don't necessarily like to lope along a road. So when I've gone to turn it into a adventure bike, there's obviously a few things I've done, and I did my research when I bought it to make sure I could sort of source all the parts that I needed to make it into an adventure bike quite easily. the main two things are obviously the 15 litre tank. Sort of, in my opinion, you need to have about 300k range, and that gets me just about or very close to 300k range. If you're going to do big trips, Simpson, obviously, for example, say it's 500k's, you need a 500k range. I'll chuck a 10 litre bladder on the back and I'm done, so to speak. But the amount of times you actually need more than 300k's is quite limited. It's, you know, the Canning Stock route, the Simpson Desert, up in the high country here. Yeah, if you want to tootle around and do circles and that sort of stuff, small circles, and, you know, just head off in every direction, yeah, you can do over 300k's, but there is always fuel up in the high country, and most places you'll ride no more than 300k's from where you're leaving from. So my goal was 300k's, and that 15 litre tank is very close. What I do is I carry a little 1.5 litre Primus bottle on me, and that's my reserve, because the way these IMS tanks are set up, they don't have a reserve on them, so I'm always a little bit paranoid that I'm just going to forget what I'm doing and run out of fuel and have no reserve. So I keep that 1.5 litre. Even if I'm just doing day rides, I usually have it tied on the rack. So a 15 litre IMS. I was pretty adamant that I wanted to get a tank that used the original plastics. As you can see, they just bolt straight on. I reckon it just looks so much nicer than having one of those big ugly 20 litre tanks. The 20 litre tanks are good, obviously, but fairly limiting. This one is still, you can still ride it in single trail. If you look between your legs here, you know, you've still got dirt bike feel between your legs. All the weight, all the volume is up in front of your knees, so you can still ride this bike as a dirt bike with that 15 litre tanks on. In fact, I've done complete days of single trail on this bike with this tank, and it doesn't really get in your way that much, so it's quite good. Yeah, so that first thing is the 15 litre tank. And the second thing that's critical is a seat, having a comfortable seat. It is a dirt bike. Some beaters, people say that they've got a 4x2 or a 2x4 if you're in America as a seat, and most brands are the same. They're not designed to be sat down on, you're designed to be up and racing in your power position, shall we say. But this bike actually had that seat concept seat on there, and that's obviously the default product that most people go with. And that's so that's, you know, the two critical things. Fuel and comfort is the first two things that I looked at, and obviously the bike came with a seat. Just my lovely wife organising tea. She's saying, how about a burger or a pizza? I'll order and pay, Sunday night tea. I'll say, okay, sounds good. Back to the review. So the first thing was the tank, second thing was the seat. Third thing, I reckon, to turn into an A.D.V bike is a rack. You can get the saddlebag styles that go around here, the Moscow Moto and Klim make them, all those brands make them. I personally like a rack because you can tie something on nice and firm, so when you're getting tossed around on the trail, you got something to tie down to. That's my personal opinion. Some of those systems are really good, they're super expensive, but I like a little rack. And when I do my Dargo rides, we call them Dargo rides in Victoria, where we ride from any sort of random location up into Dargo, right up into the hills, and you camp the night in the pub, drink too much alcohol and ride back again, so it's sort of a 2-day ride. I carry like a water bottle and a fuel bottle on that rack. It's really handy just for that sort of stuff. Lots of day rides I do, I've always have a water bottle and a fuel bottle on there, and as I said, that's my reserve for my tank. So we've gone for a tank, we've gone for a seat, we've gone for a rack. We're getting pretty close to an adventure bike now. Obviously I've got dot-approved tyres and I've balanced the wheels. That helps a lot. They're Dunlop 606s. They seem to be pretty good. Most people say they're pretty good. Some people say the fronts are a little bit dodgy. They might be right, don't know. I'll reserve my judgment on that. This is my first set, so yeah. So tank, seat, rack, road tyres or semi-road tyres, and then it just comes down to probably two other things. Lighting. The enduro bike lighting is atrocious, as we all know. So all I've done is just put the upgraded bulb in there in the headlight, left that stock. Again, if I want to strip this back to a dirt bike, I can do this all very easily. So the headlight stays there, and I just bought these Steady brand headlights, which are, you know, just general use spotlights, so to speak, and I bolted those on there. It's another positive thing about the beaters. They have really good stator outputs on them. They got a really strong electrical system on them. So I just bolted those on my handguards. So if I'm turning it back to a dirt bike and talking about versatility again, the handguards and the headlights come off together. So lighting is the other thing, and the other thing is just navigation and communication. All I have is a phone. As you can see, I was just dealing with my lovely wife, organising for tea for tonight, and seriously, I can do 99% of what I want to do with a phone. Most of the time I use HEMA. If I just go to HEMA and go like that, no, that's not what I want, get out of that. I go like that, there I am on the map. I can zoom in and out while riding with my gloves on. That's my HEMA map. I've got a phone in there. I've got an app called 360, so my wife can track where I am no matter where I am. So I don't carry a spot, I don't carry an inReach or anything like that. I don't do UHFs, centres or anything, Bluetooth, all that sort of stuff. I like to go out by myself a lot, and with that 360 app, my wife can track where I am. So if all of a sudden she hasn't heard anything from me for a while, and most times I'll usually text her at night just to say I'm okay or whatever. But between those three things, and Google Maps, of course, HEMA Maps, the 360 app, and obviously a phone and GPS and Google Maps, I'm happy with that. That's just the quad lock setup, and that's just got the power going back to the battery, and so I can test a Samsung phone. So that's a mini USB, a C series USB, I think they're called. So that'll charge lots of different things. It'll charge a GoPro. It'll charge a lot of different things. So I can unplug that and plug that into another device if I wanted to. So that's my communication. That's all I have, and that's obviously just the quad lock, and I highly recommend the quad locks. I think they're a fantastic product. Take that off, you leave the bike, take the phone with you. So it's quite simple. The only criticism of quad locks, of course, is they can be a bugger to lock back on sometimes. So that's my communication. That's all I need. I don't need a separate GPS. I don't need the inReaches and spots and all that sort of stuff. I personally think people get a little bit overzealous with all that stuff. You can always walk out in most spots. If your bike blows up, breaks down, goes over a cliff, and certainly that's the way I set it up. The other things that I've done to the bike is to adventurise it, shall we say. So we talked about tank seats, racks, lights, and just communication GPS, so to speak. The other things I've done to the bike, and tyres and balancing, I suppose, is I've just upgraded the suspension. So when I bought the bike, I took it for quite a few rides and thought it was all feeling quite good. But I knew I'd have to put a heavier spring in the rear, so I just said to a local suspension specialist, I think I'll just get all the suspension serviced, put a heavier spring in the rear, and we'll get a automatic adjuster on the preload. So I've got one of those preload adjusters that I can just stick the nose of my rattle gun in there, and when I put a bit of weight more on, I just wind the preload down a little bit, so it's very comfortable all the time. So I just got the suspension serviced, heavier spring in the back. I didn't put any heavier springs in the front. Felt like they were going to do the job, and the suspension specialist certainly thought that was the case as well. So I've just done that for the suspension, but really I'm running out of things or money I've spent. These are an eBay foot peg. They're a little bit wider. Very good for the money, unbelievable. $70 odd, $80 odd for those foot pegs seem to be going quite well. I've had them on the bike now for 3 or 4 months. So so that's the bike. It's there's no other reason I chose a Beta 480 except for they've got a good reputation as being a good, strong, robust bike. There was a cheap one available on the market. And of course they are a good bike. I've had Betas before. I've got an X-Trainer, and the Beta brand is quite solid. In their 4-strokes, they don't have any history at all of any major problems, starter motors, doing top ends and that sort of stuff. I didn't have a problem with buying it once I did my research. So just in closing, I'd probably just like to wrap up with what my impressions are on using these sort of bikes as A.D.V bikes. Fundamentally, they are a dirt bike. The WRs, the EXC 450s, they are fundamentally a dirt bike, and they ride like a dirt bike. They're designed to be race bikes and be ridden in the bush at great pace. So how do they go as A.D.V bikes? This is one of the big questions that I haven't seen anyone really answer. Everyone gets wrapped up in their build and tells you how good they are, but actually, how are they as A.D.V bikes? The best way to describe it is really good in certain situations. On fire trails, of course, they're awesome. They're great fun. 80Ks, 60Ks, 40Ks, anything where a four-wheel drive goes, they're absolutely awesome fun. When you get them out on open roads, gravel or tar, that's where you know that you're riding a dirt bike. The Americans seem to do it a lot. They ride these, they call them dual sports, they ride these bikes out on the freeways and they say, oh yeah, you can do 60 or 80 Ks on 60 or 80 miles an hour on these things. It's not comfortable. You're copping a lot of wind, there's a fair bit of vibration and there's a lot of noise. And not particularly with this one, I've got the PowerCore 4 exhaust on this one that came on the bike. That's the race exhaust, so it's quite noisy. So it's banging along and you're up in the wind and there's a bit of vibration. So don't expect to jump on one of these and ride to Cape York from Victoria. I would have thought they'd be a fair bit uncomfortable. Listen, there's guys that do it. They ride WR 250s. Me personally, I think they're not ideal in that situation. If you wanted to do the Simpson, I wouldn't suggest you ride from Melbourne to Alice Springs and do the Simpson. I'd chuck it on the back of your ute, ride it to Alice Springs, do a loop and come back to Alice Springs, chuck it on the back of your ute and drive home again. I personally don't think they're comfortable enough and well mannered enough on the road. They certainly sit on the road, please understand, they certainly sit on the road fine. They just aren't that comfortable. Having said that, I'm going to take this bike to the next level. There's three things, obviously, as I discussed, probably 3 to 4 things. I'm going to put the silencer in the exhaust, and that'll quieten it down at speed. Second thing I'm going to do is just try and get a bit of wind protection up the front. I don't want to go to the full extent of putting a tower on, a navigation tower or something like that, but I just want to put a screen on the front and possibly just move that headlight trout out a little bit, fix it up a little bit firmer and build a little bit more space so I can get my phone off my handlebars and up into a navigation tower, so to speak, but only a very lightweight thing. The vibration, I'm going to try and gear it down a little bit. And so hopefully, with a little bit noise, a little bit less vibration and a little bit less wind, a little bit more wind protection, it'll make it a bit more comfortable, the bike. And the final thing is I'm going to put an air hawk. I'm going to buy one of those air hawk seat cushions, I think for long trips. Now obviously when I'm riding up into here I won't bother with it, but certainly when I'm going to go on a 3 or 4 day ride I'll be chucking that Air Hawk seat cushion on it. So those are the 4 things I'm going to do. I'll do a follow-up on that because it's very hard to get people giving honest reviews and really telling you the truth. But from my point of view at this stage, in its current form, these bikes are not super comfortable on highway kilometres or on open roads. Anything up to 80 Ks, they're fine. There's bugger all wind noise. There's very little wind hitting you in the chest, but you get above 80 Ks and it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable. But anyway, I'll certainly do a review after I've done those 4 mods. So we'll have a look at gearing it down, lessening the vibration, putting some wind protection on, a little bit more comfortable seat and quietening the exhaust down, and then I'll report back to you and see how I go. But other than that, so far so good. I love getting out on it. As I said, I haven't spent a lot of money. If I really continue with it, I'll probably end up buying a later model, getting one of the fuel injected models, and we'll see what's available on the market. But certainly at this stage in my thinking, I wouldn't be looking at getting anything heavier than say a 690 or something like that, but possibly the 500 EXCs, because that got that longer stroking motor, might be a better option than these shorter stroking 450s and 480s. I'll have to review that, and certainly the earlier model KTMs had a good reputation with those. The 14 through to 16 model KTM 500s had a really good reputation for being able to lope along the road quite comfortable, so they might be worth considering as well. Anyway, guys, that's about it. I better head home. I'll keep you posted on those 4 things that I want to work on, that wind deflection and the more comfortable seat option, and trying to quieten it down and gear it a bit taller maybe. I'll do another review in a couple of months' time when I've done a bit more camping and done some longer trips on it, so to speak. So certainly expect to see some more reviews coming your way. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. We'll hope to see you out on the trail somewhere, riding bikes and having fun. Goodbye from Dirt Bike A.D.V.